The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, and he stayed close to the sea. One of the synagogue officials named Jairus came forward. Seeing him, he fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him, saying, "My daughter is at the point of death. Please come lay your hands on her, that she may get well and live." He went off with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed upon him. There was a woman afflicted with hemorrhages for 12 years. She had suffered greatly at the hands of many doctors and had spent all that she had. Yet she was not helped, but only grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. She said, "If I but touch his clothes, I shall be cured." Immediately her flow of blood dried up. She felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. Jesus, aware at once that power had gone out of him, turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who has touched my clothes?" But his disciples said to him, "You see how the crowd is pressing around you, and yet you asked, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. The woman, realizing what had happened to her, approached in fear and trembling. She fell down before Jesus and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has saved you." While he was still speaking, people from the synagogue official's house arrived and said, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher any longer?" Disregarding the message that was reported, Jesus said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid, just have faith." He did not allow anyone to accompany him inside except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they arrived at the house of the synagogue official, he caught sight of a commotion. People were weeping and wailing loudly. So he went in and said to them, "Why this commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but asleep." They ridiculed him, but then he put them all out. He took along the child's father and mother and those who were with him, and entered the room where the child was. He took the child by the hands and said to her, "Talitha koum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." The girl, a child of 12, arose immediately and walked around. At that, they were utterly astounded. He gave strict orders that no one should know this, and said that she should be given something to eat. The Gospel of the Lord. Good morning. You know, sometimes when we read these Gospels, we listen to these Gospels, we take them as somewhat passé. Yeah, another miracle. We've heard a lot of stories about miracles. But this is a very interesting one, and it's really a radical shift for Jesus. And you have to dissect it a little bit to see that these two stories of the woman with hemorrhages and Jairus' daughter are very much interrelated. And there's little clues. The woman with hemorrhages has been sick for 12 years. Jairus' daughter was 12 years old. Now, Mark didn't do that by accident. The number 12 brings these two together. And what these two have in common is found in the Old Testament, in the book of Leviticus. In the book of Leviticus, they talk about Jewish cleanliness and Jewish law. And in the Jewish faith, certainly true at the time of Jesus, a person who had a disease and a person who was dead were unclean. You could not touch them, or else you would be unclean. So the woman with the disease touches Jesus, and in tradition, that would have made him unclean. That would have made him anathema, pushed him out of the society. But instead of accepting that, he overcame it. He turned this woman, this outcast, into something of a message to everybody that his power can overcome that. He cured her, and she walked away happy. In Jairus' daughter, he walked in and bent down next to her and touched her. Now, in the book of Leviticus, it tells us that the only people allowed to touch a dead body are those closest to her as they prepare for burial. Anyone else who touched a dead body was unclean. Jesus, certainly not related to this girl, touches her and overcomes the anathema, overcomes the problem, and cures her. And he is basically saying to the people of his day through Mark, something is different. Something has changed. I am here now, and I make a difference. By touching me, by having faith in me, you can overcome the status of outcast. You can overcome death and disease and uncleanliness. It's fair to ask with that story, so what? What does that mean to us today? Well, the same thing is true of us today. The outcasts of our society are plentiful. For all kinds of reasons, we have silly rules and regulations similar to don't touch a dead body and stay away from people with diseases. Now, we have health code laws, certainly, but we also have things that shun people. No, we don't go near them, where they're different from us. Stay away from them. Jesus is telling us, welcome those people. Let those people in. Those restrictions, those old laws don't apply. I am here now, and I make all the difference. Let them touch me. Let them have faith in me. Let me touch them in some way to cure what ails them. And the funny little secret is, as we consider this whole thing, that it's not always about the other. When we start talking about the outcasts of society, the people who are shunned or the people who have problems, we always think it's somebody else. We always think it's somebody out there. But I think if we're honest, the reality is we all have our problems. We all have our issues. We all have reasons that we are unclean. And Jesus is saying to us today, that's okay. Come to me anyhow. Come to me and have faith in me. Touch my garments. Let me lead you to health and happiness. We can't think of this as a story about a woman 2,000 years ago or a synagogue official. We can't think about this as something we are talking about out there in our society. The homeless, the sick, the lonely, whatever we want. This is about us. This is about our relationship to the Lord. And the Lord is offering us, you and me individually, an opportunity to simply touch Him, to be touched by Him, to lead us into a healthy, happy relationship with Him. It's an incredible offer. It's a joy-filled offer, and it's a radical offer. It was radical at the time that Jesus did this stuff, and it's radical today. Christianity is a radical religion. A relationship with the Lord is a radical thought. But He's calling us forward and saying, do it. Trust me. I can lead you to the right place.